At our New Year's Eve party in front of 50 guests counting down to midnight, my daughter raised her glass and loudly declared, "My father is senile. He is no longer capable of managing his own assets." The room fell silent. I stood there humiliated, but chose to remain silent and leave. That wasn't the end of it. The next morning, my daughter came to my house. More accurately, she came to pressure me into signing a document to relinquish my inheritance rights. I said nothing and pulled out a letter my late wife had left behind. The moment she saw it, the color drained completely from her face. "Thank you for being here. Where are you watching from? Drop your location below. I'd love to know." Quick note, this is a fictional story crafted to explore family trust and self-protection. Characters and events are imaginary, but the message absolutely valuable. Now let's see what happened next. I'm standing in the corner of my living room on New Year's Eve watching 50 guests toast champagne and laugh like the world isn't about to flip upside down. The house is warm with bodies and conversation. Sinatra playing low on the stereo, the scent of honey-glazed ham mixing with pine from the Christmas tree we haven't taken down yet. But I can't shake the feeling that something's wrong. My name is Randall Pierce. I'm 67 years old, and until 3 years ago, I taught United States history at Asheville High School for 35 years. I loved it, the kids, the stories making James Madison sound interesting. I won Teacher of the Year twice, had former students show up at my retirement party with their own kids in tow. That's the kind of career that makes you feel like your life meant something. Lorraine and I moved into this house 30 years ago. She passed away 18 months ago, a sudden heart attack in the garden she loved, and the grief still catches me off guard. I'll reach for 2 coffee mugs instead of 1. I'll hear a woman laugh at the grocery store and turn around thinking maybe, but it's never her. This house, though. This house is something special. It belonged to Lorraine's father, George Hartwell. George was the kind of man they don't make anymore. Grew up during the Depression, started with nothing, built something real. He worked in textile mills as a teenager, saved every penny, taught himself accounting from library books. By 25, he'd bought a failing machine parts manufacturer and turned it profitable within 2 years. George wasn't flashy about his success. No mansion, no yacht, no country club. He lived modestly, invested wisely. And when he sold his business in March of 2017, he netted $580,000 after taxes. He died 6 months later at 89, sitting in his favorite chair with a book in his lap and the Braves game on the radio. The doctor said his heart just stopped. Peaceful as you could ask for. This Tudor revival house was his pride and joy. Built in 1935, its all-exposed wooden beams, leaded glass windows, stone and stucco exterior, with ivy climbing the north wall. 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths. 3,500 square feet on an acre and a half of terraced land. Lorraine's English cottage garden sits out back, roses, lavender flagstones she spent 15 years perfecting. When we inherited the house in October 2017, it was appraised at $350,000. Asheville's real estate market has climbed steadily since then. Our tax assessment now sits at $575,000. But the house is only part of what George left behind. There was life insurance, $150,000 paid within 30 days. A trust he'd established in 2015, holding another $100,000 in stocks and bonds. His savings and investments carefully managed over 60 years, totaling $65,000 after estate fees. $890,000 total. That's not rich by today's standards, but for a retired teacher and his late wife who'd been a medical social worker, it's security. It's knowing I don't have to worry about property taxes or a new roof or whether my pension will cover medications when I'm 80. It's the difference between scraping by and living with dignity. George set it all up in an irrevocable trust with Lorraine as beneficiary. When she passed, it came to me, sole beneficiary. George had been specific about that, and Lorraine followed his wishes when she updated everything after his death. Blair's my only child. 31, now sharp as a tack, beautiful like her mother with that same stubborn streak that could move mountains if she aimed it right. She's a real estate agent. Sells homes in the nicer parts of Asheville, makes decent commissions when the market's good. 18 months ago, 6 months after Lorraine died, Blair brought Pierce Donovan home for the first time. I was still deep in grief, barely keeping my head above water. Blair called ahead, said she wanted me to meet someone special. Pierce showed up wearing expensive clothes, too expensive. Designer jeans, a watch that caught the light, shoes that looked like they'd never seen a scuff mark. He was 39, 10 years older than Blair, with easy confidence that either comes from genuine success or from years perfecting a performance. He shook my hand firmly, called me "Sir," complimented the house. "This is beautiful property, Mr. Pierce. You don't see Tudor craftsmanship like this anymore." I wanted to like him. Blair was smiling in a way I hadn't seen since before her mother passed. But something felt off. Maybe it was how his eyes moved around the room cataloging things. Maybe it was how quickly he steered conversation toward the house's history, its value. Maybe it was just a father's instinct. I didn't say anything. Told myself I was being paranoid, overprotective, still raw from losing Lorraine. Blair was a grown woman. She didn't need her old man vetting her relationships. Over the following months, Pierce became a fixture. Always charming, always saying the right things. He talked about his consulting business, though vague on details. He seemed to have money but no clear source. Blair started changing. Small things at first. She stopped calling as often. When she visited, Pierce was usually with her, and conversations felt managed, controlled. She started dressing differently, spending more posting pictures from restaurants I knew she couldn't afford on her commissions alone. I asked her once if everything was okay. She laughed it off. "Dad, I'm fine. Better than fine. Pierce and I are talking about the future, real future." I should have pressed harder, but she was my daughter, and I wanted her happy, and I was so tired from missing Lorraine that I didn't have the energy to fight battles that might not even be real. Tonight, Blair insisted on hosting this party here. Said it would be good for me, good for the house, a fresh start for the new year. She invited half the neighborhood, Barbara and Kenneth and Russell from church, some of my old colleagues, a few of her real estate friends. Pierce is here too, across the room, holding court like he owns the place. And Blair keeps looking at me with an expression I can't read. Not quite pity, not quite guilt. Something in between. In 15 minutes, we'll count down to midnight. Everyone will sing Auld Lang Syne and make promises about the year ahead most won't keep. But I can feel it in my bones, the same way I used to feel a pop quiz bombing, the same way I felt that morning when I found Lorraine in the garden. Something's coming. Something bad. I didn't know then that within hours she would try to take it all away. 18 months earlier, Lorraine met Pierce for the first time. She saw what I couldn't. It was June of 2023, 6 months after George's passing, when Blair called to say she was bringing someone special to dinner. I could hear excitement in her voice, that breathless quality she'd had as a little girl discovering something wonderful. "His name's Pierce, Dad. Pierce Donovan. I really want you and Mom to meet him." Lorraine was in the kitchen going through seed catalogs. She looked up and smiled, but something flickered across her face. Not quite worry, more like anticipation of worry. "That's nice, honey." When? Saturday, 6 o'clock. Saturday came warm and clear. Lorraine made her famous herb-roasted chicken with rosemary from the garden. I set the patio table where we could watch sunset paint the hills purple and gold. Blair arrived on time. Pierce was everything promised, polished, confident, well-dressed. He brought expensive wine, shook my hand. With proper firmness, kissed Lorraine's cheek, complimented everything. "Mrs. Pierce, this property is absolutely stunning. That English cottage garden must take incredible dedication." Lorraine smiled, her professional smile, the one from hospital functions when she was polite but not warm. 15 years of work. The roses are particularly demanding. Throughout dinner, Pierce was charming. Asked about my teaching career, seemed genuinely interested in the stories. Talked about his consulting business, helping small companies optimize operations. It sounded impressive in that vague way that meant either very successful or very good at sounding successful. Blair glowed, kept touching his arm, laughing at his jokes, needing our approval more than she wanted to admit. I wanted to give it to her. God, I wanted to like this man. But I kept catching Lorraine watching him. Not obviously, she was too subtle for that. But I'd been married 32 years. I knew her tells. The wine glass held a little too tight, smile never quite reaching her eyes. Questions that sounded casual, but weren't. So Pierce, what brought you to Asheville? Opportunity mostly. Charlotte was wearing on me. Asheville's got this energy, you know, creative, authentic. And you've been here how long? About 8 months. That's around the time you would have met Blair. Actually, yes. He smiled at my daughter. Best move I ever made. After dinner, Blair and Pierce walked to the garden while we cleared dishes. The moment they were out of earshot, Lorraine turned to me. I don't trust him. I almost dropped the plate. Lorraine wasn't dramatic. She didn't make snap judgments. She was measured, thoughtful, 32 years in hospital social work, seeing humanity's best and worst while maintaining professional composure through all of it. Lorraine, I mean it, Randall. Something's wrong with that man. He seems nice enough. Blair's happy. He's performing. She set down the platter harder than necessary. I've seen men like him before. Predators. They know exactly what to say, how to present themselves, how to make you doubt your own instincts. That's strong language. I worked elder abuse cases 15 years. I know what I'm looking at. She met my eyes, expression steel. He asked 4 questions about this house. 4. How long we've lived here, what it's worth, whether we own it outright, what happens when we're gone. Maybe he's just making conversation. Randall. She took my hands. Trust me. That man is dangerous, and Blair's falling for it. I'm going to make sure we're protected. I wanted to believe her. But what was I supposed to do? Tell my daughter her boyfriend gave us bad vibes? The following week, Lorraine had errands. I thought nothing of it. Found out later she'd driven to Stuart Finch's office downtown. Stuart had been our family attorney since before Blair was born. Handled Will's estate planning, all George's paperwork, competent and discreet. Lorraine sat in his office and asked for a sealed envelope. Inside, she wrote a letter and gave specific instructions. If anything happens to me, you give this to Randall. Not before, only after. Stuart locked that envelope in his safe. Never told me it existed. 7 months later, on January 15th, 2024, I woke at 7:15 like always. Tuesday morning. Cold for Asheville, maybe 35 degrees, but clear. I went downstairs in my robe, started coffee, grabbed the newspaper. Normal routine. The kind of comfortable morning you take for granted until you can't anymore. At 7:45, I looked out the kitchen window toward the garden. Lorraine was out there in her canvas jacket and gardening gloves, kneeling among the roses. She liked working early. Said morning light was best for spotting branches needing pruning. I watched her sipping coffee, thinking how lucky I was. Then she shifted. No, she slumped. One moment upright, the next, folding forward like a puppet with cut strings. The coffee mug shattered. I was out the door, running across frost-brittle grass in slippers, no coat, no phone, nothing but pure panic. Lorraine. She was on her side among the roses, pruning shears still in her gloved hand, eyes open but not seeing. Face gray, not pale gray. I rolled her onto her back ear to her chest. Nothing. No heartbeat. No breathing. CPR training from years ago kicked in. Hands locked, arms straight, 30 chest compressions. Breathe into her mouth, 30 more. Come on, baby. Come on. Her head lolled, skin cold. But I kept going because stopping meant accepting. I don't know how long, 2 minutes 10 before I ran inside, grabbed the phone, dialed 911 with shaking hands. My wife not breathing, heart attack, please. The dispatcher was calm. Asked our address. Told me keep doing CPR. Paramedics 6 minutes out. I went back outside. Kept compressions. Counted aloud because it kept me from screaming. 30, breathe, 30, breathe. Paramedics arrived at 8:15. 2 of them young and efficient, taking over with equipment and confidence I didn't have. Monitors, IV defibrillator. I stood useless watching strangers fight for my wife's life in her garden. Sir, we need to transport. They loaded her into the ambulance. I followed in my car, still wearing my robe covered in garden dirt. The ER doctor met me at Mission Hospital. Young woman, kind eyes, expression telling everything before she spoke. Mr. Pierce, I'm so sorry. We did everything we could. Massive heart attack. LAD artery, the widowmaker. Complete blockage, no warning. She'd had maybe 30 to 60 seconds of consciousness. Time of death, 8:47 a.m. I called Blair, heard myself say, "Your mother's gone," like someone else using my voice. She screamed, went silent, said she was coming. The rest is fragments, paperwork, phone calls. Lawrence showing up somehow, driving me home. The house empty, the garden still holding the impression where Lorraine had fallen. For weeks after, I couldn't go out there. The garden that had been her sanctuary became the place I lost her. I didn't know then that Lorraine had left me a weapon to fight back. The 11 months after Lorraine's death were the darkest of my life. Grief isn't a chapter you read. It's a room with no windows where you can't find the door. The funeral was January 19th, Grace Presbyterian Church, where we'd been members 28 years. Pastor Daniel Wright presided. 200 people came, former students, hospital colleagues, neighbors, church members. They filled the sanctuary and stood along the back wall. Blair was there in black, holding my arm through the receiving line. She accepted condolences with appropriate gravity, but felt distant, like she was performing rather than being. Pierce wasn't there. Blair said he thought it should be just family. At the time, I was grateful. The reception was at our house. Barbara Glenn organized everything. Kenneth Davis made sure I had food I didn't eat. Russell Hayes sat with me on the porch while I stared at Lorraine's garden and said nothing. Everyone left by evening. Blair kissed my cheek, said she'd check tomorrow, drove away. I stood in my empty house, surrounded by covered dishes, and understood what forever meant. The months blurred. February into March into April. I stopped shaving regularly, wore the same shirts, ate when I remembered, which wasn't often. The garden, Lorraine's beloved garden, went untended. Weeds crept between flagstones. Roses went unpruned. Barbara came twice weekly with groceries. "Randall, you need to eat." "I'm fine." "You're not fine." But taking care of myself felt like moving on, and moving on felt like betrayal. So I let her stock my refrigerator and waited for her to leave. Kenneth offered to help with the garden. "Just point me at what needs doing." "It's okay, I'll get to it." I never did. The house settled into neglect. Dust on bookshelves. Mail piling unopened. The kitchen where Lorraine made rosemary chicken became the place I made toast, and sometimes remembered to eat it. Blair called occasionally. Short conversations. "How are you, Dad?" I'm okay. Need anything? No, I'm fine. She didn't visit often. Said she was busy with work. I didn't push. In June, 6 months after Lorraine passed, Pierce came back. Blair brought him on a Sunday afternoon. I was in sweatpants and a 3-day-old shirt pretending to watch baseball. Pierce shook my hand, somber. Mr. Pierce, I'm so sorry for your loss. I nodded. Couldn't find energy to care. They stayed an hour. Blair made tea I didn't drink. Pierce talked about business deals, opportunities, background noise, but he was back, and after that, always around. Picking Blair up for dinner. Stopping by on random afternoons. Always polite, always appropriate, always there. I was too numb to notice the pattern. August 15th, Tuesday afternoon. My phone buzzed with a text from Blair. Just wanted you to know I'm happy. Really happy. Talk soon. I typed back, that's good, honey. I didn't know until months later she'd married Pierce that morning. Courthouse wedding. No guests, no family, no announcement. My daughter got married, and I found out after the fact too late to say anything. Through fall, Blair changed. Visits became rare, awkward. She dressed differently, expensive clothes, designer bags she couldn't afford on commissions. Social media filled with pictures from $50 restaurants. When she visited, Pierce was always with her. Conversations felt managed. She'd ask about my health in ways that felt probing. Dad, are you remembering medications? Having trouble with confusion? Managing finances okay? I should have asked questions, but I was too deep in grief to see manipulation happening. December came. Blair insisted on hosting a New Year's Eve party at my house. Dad, it'll be good for you. You can't sit alone anymore. Let me organize something. Ring in 2025 together. I didn't want a party. But Blair pushed, and I didn't have strength to fight. December 31st. Guests started arriving at 9. 50 people filled my house. Barbara brought ham. Kenneth brought wine. Russell and Louise brought desserts. Former colleagues I hadn't seen in months showed up with forced cheer. I stood in the corner nursing water, feeling like a stranger at my own party. Blair and Pierce arrived at 9:30, fashionably late. She wore a red dress that probably cost more than my pension. Pierce worked the room like a politician. At 9:45, Blair stood on the fireplace hearth, clinked her glass until conversation stopped. Everyone can, I have your attention? The room quieted. Something cold slid down my spine. I want to thank you all for coming. It means so much to have this community around my dad. Her smile was practiced. Unfortunately, I need to share something weighing on our family. I opened my mouth. No sound came. My father has been struggling, more than most realize. The grief has taken a serious toll. Over the past months, I've noticed significant cognitive decline. Memory issues, confusion, difficulty managing basic tasks. 50 pairs of eyes turned to me. I've consulted medical professionals and legal advisors. It's clear Dad can no longer live independently or manage his affairs. So effective immediately I'll be taking over as his conservator. For his protection and safety. The room was silent, dead silent. I stood frozen, feeling every eye. Heat flooded my face. My mouth opened and closed. I wanted to shout it was a lie, that I was fine, that she had no right, but nothing came out. The shock was too complete. Pierce stood beside Blair, expression appropriately, grave, playing concerned son-in-law perfectly. Near the back, Marcus Stone, Eugene's grandson, had his phone up recording. His face wasn't sympathetic. It was confused, skeptical. Blair. I finally managed. Dad, it's okay. We're going to take care of you. She stepped down, came toward me like I was a frightened animal. You don't have to worry anymore. The room erupted in uncomfortable murmurs. People gathered coats, made excuses, filed out with averted eyes. Within 15 minutes, the party was over. By 10:30, everyone was gone except Blair and Pierce. We'll talk tomorrow, Dad. Get some rest. Blair kissed my cheek, cold, clinical, and they left. I stood alone, surrounded by half-empty champagne glasses and abandoned plates, trying to understand what had just happened. The house felt like a crime scene. I couldn't stay in the living room. I went upstairs to the guest room, sat on the bed edge, stared at nothing for 6 hours. At 4 a.m, while darkness pressed against windows, I packed a small bag. Underwear, socks, 2 shirts, toiletries. Moved like underwater. Found my wallet, phone keys. I walked out of my house, the house George built, the house Lorraine loved. The house I'd lived in 30 years, and drove to Lawrence's apartment. I didn't know if I'd ever come back. I spent New Year's Day at Lawrence's house, numb and defeated. Then Stuart Finch arrived at 9 o'clock in the morning. I hadn't slept. After leaving my house at 4 a.m., I'd driven to Lawrence Miles's apartment in a daze, still wearing the same clothes from the party. Still feeling 50 pairs of eyes staring at me while my daughter declared me incompetent in front of everyone I knew. Lawrence opened his door in pajamas, took one look at my face and pulled me inside without questions. Made coffee I didn't drink. Sat with me in silence while I tried to make sense of what had just happened. At 9 a.m., his doorbell rang. Stuart Finch stood on the porch in a suit, despite it being New Year's Day, holding a manila envelope that looked like it had been waiting a long time to be opened. Randall, I'm glad Lawrence called me. May I come in? Stuart sat across from me at Lawrence's kitchen table and set the envelope between us with the careful precision of a man about to deliver life-changing news. I've been holding this for 18 months. Lorraine gave it to me in June of 2023 with very specific instructions. If anything happened to her, I was to deliver it to you, and only when circumstances made it necessary. He pushed the envelope toward me. I believe we've reached that point. My hands shook as I picked it up. The envelope was sealed with red wax, old-fashioned. My name was written across the front in her handwriting, clean, precise, unmistakably hers. I broke the seal. Inside was a letter, 3 pages, dated June 15th, 2023. The day after Blair brought Pierce home for the first time. My dearest Randall, if you're reading this, I'm gone and something has happened that Stuart judged serious enough to give you this letter. I'm so sorry I'm not there to help you through whatever's happening. But I hope these words can do what I can't. Last night, Blair brought a man named Pierce Donovan to dinner. You liked him. You wanted to like him because Blair was so happy. I know your generous heart. But I saw something you didn't. I spent 32 years working with vulnerable people and I learned to recognize predators. That man is a predator. The way he asked about the house, about money, about our estate, he wasn't making conversation. He was hunting. If I was right, if Pierce has done something, if Blair has been pulled into something she doesn't understand, then you need to know what I've done to protect us. Her handwriting blurred. I had to stop, wipe my eyes, force myself to keep reading. 10 years ago, when my father died and left us everything, I established an irrevocable trust. What I didn't tell you was exactly how I structured it. The trust holds the Tudor house and all liquid assets from my father's estate. Total value approximately $890,000. You, Randall Pierce, are the sole beneficiary. Not me. Not Blair. You. When I passed away, everything transferred directly to you under the terms of the trust. The house, $575,000 appraised value. The savings, investments, insurance, $315,000 liquid. All of it is yours, held in trust, managed by Blue Ridge Regional Bank, untouchable by anyone except you. I looked up at Stuart. I didn't know the details. I thought we both inherited. Lorraine was very careful about the structure, very deliberate. Keep reading. Here's the important part. The trust includes a poison pill clause. If anyone challenges your competency, tries to take control of your assets, or attempts to remove you as beneficiary, they automatically forfeit any claim to the estate. Blair is named as a contingent beneficiary. If something happens to you naturally, she inherits everything. But if she or anyone acting on her behalf tries to challenge your rights, she gets nothing except a token bequest of $50,000. That's it. The rest would go to charity. I put this in place because I wanted to protect you from exactly the kind of person I saw in Pierce Donovan. Men like him look for vulnerable targets. Older people, widows, widowers, people with assets and no protection. If you're reading this, it means I was right to be afraid. It means something has happened. And it means you need to fight back. The letter ended with a line that broke me. You are stronger than you know, Randall Pierce. You know that the truth always wins eventually. Hold on to that. Hold on to the truth. All my love, Lorraine. I set the letter down carefully. My chest felt tight. My eyes burned. Lorraine had seen this coming 18 months ago. She'd met Pierce once, and known exactly what he was. While I was drowning in grief, she'd been preparing for a war I didn't even know was starting. She was protecting me, I whispered. Yes. Stuart pulled out a folder. And she gave us very strong legal ground to stand on. What happened last night, Blair's public declaration that you're incompetent, that was the trigger event. She's attempting to establish conservatorship, which means she's challenging your control of the trust assets. Can she do that? She can try. She's already filed preliminary paperwork. There's a hearing scheduled for January 28th. The judge will review evidence, hear testimony, determine whether you're competent to manage your own affairs. And if the judge agrees with her, then she becomes your conservator, controls your finances, potentially forces you into assisted living. Stuart met my eyes. But Randall, she won't succeed. Lorraine made that almost impossible. The moment Blair filed for conservatorship, she triggered the forfeiture clause. If she pushes this forward and loses, she gets nothing but the $50,000 token. Even if she somehow wins, the trust structure makes it nearly impossible for her to access the principal. Lawrence, who'd been standing quietly by the coffee maker, finally spoke. What does Randall need to do? Stuart ticked off points on his fingers. First, medical evaluation. We get Dr. Cross Randall's physician of 15 years to examine him and provide documentation of full cognitive function. Second, character witnesses. People who can testify that Randall is sharp, independent, managing his life just fine. Third, we expose Pierce. If we can show the court that this whole thing is a scheme orchestrated by a con artist, the judge will throw it out immediately. I sat there listening to them plan, feeling something I hadn't felt since last night's humiliation. Hope. Not much, just a flicker. But it was there. Lorraine had protected me. She'd seen the threat, built the defenses, and left me a weapon I didn't even know I had. The house was mine. The money was mine. And Blair's attempt to take it away had just triggered the very mechanism designed to stop her. Stuart gathered his papers. I'll start assembling our defense. Medical evaluation first. I'll call Dr. Cross today. Randall, can you make a list of people who know you well? Neighbors, church members, former colleagues, people who can vouch for your competence. I found my voice. Barbara Glenn, Kenneth Davis, Russell Hayes, Louise Harper, probably a dozen others. Perfect. Get me that list. Stuart stood, extended his hand. Randall, I know last night was devastating, but you're not alone. and you're not defenseless. Lorraine made sure of that. After Stuart left, Lawrence poured me fresh coffee and sat down across from me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he reached across the table and squeezed my shoulder. "Let me look into Pierce Donovan's background. Lawrence called me on January 3rd. Randall, sit down. You need to hear this." I was back at my own house. Stuart had insisted I return. The place felt hollow, echoing with memories of New Year's Eve. But this was my home. I wasn't giving it up without a fight. Lawrence's voice had an edge I'd never heard before. Not anger, something colder. "I found something. A lot of somethings. Can I come over?" He arrived 20 minutes later carrying a laptop and a thick folder. We sat at my kitchen table and Lawrence opened the folder with the careful precision of a man presenting evidence. "I've spent 2 days digging into Pierce Donovan, called in favors from my bookkeeping clients. What I found..." He shook his head. "Randall, this man is not who he says he is." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean? Pierce Donovan isn't his real name. It's an alias. He legally changed it in 2021. Lawrence slid a document across the table. "His birth name is Marcus Dunn." I stared at the name change petition. Marcus James Dunn, born April 12, 1986, changed to Pierce Alexander Donovan in March 2021. Reason: professional rebranding. Why would someone need to rebrand professionally? Because Marcus Dunn has a criminal record. Lawrence pulled out more documents. 2 fraud convictions. First, in 2018 real estate scam in Charlotte. He convinced elderly homeowners to take out reverse mortgages with him as beneficiary. 4 victims lost their homes. Served 18 months. My hands went cold. And the second, 2021, right before the name change. Investment fraud in Raleigh. Targeted widows and widowers promised to optimize portfolios. Cleaned out 3 retirement accounts totaling over $200,000. Served another 2 years. I felt sick. So he gets out in 2023. And 6 months later, he's dating your daughter. Lawrence's expression was grim. This isn't coincidence. This is what he does. He finds vulnerable people with money and bleeds them dry. But Blair isn't vulnerable. She's a single woman whose mother just died, whose father has an $890,000 inheritance. Lawrence leaned forward. To a predator like Marcus, that's perfect. He didn't pursue Blair for Blair. He pursued her for access to you. The room tilted. I gripped the table edge. What else? Lawrence pulled out civil suits. After his first conviction, families sued him. The Hendersons lost their home in Cornelius, $340,000. The Patels lost their business property, $280,000. 4 families total. People who'd worked their whole lives had it stolen by a man who knew how to exploit grief. He pulled out a marriage certificate. Blair and Marcus got married August 15, 2024, Mecklenburg County Courthouse. No guests, no family. I stared at my daughter's signature next to that man's fake name. August, 7 months after Lorraine died. You didn't know, Lawrence said. No. My voice hoarse. She didn't tell me. Because he told her not to. That's what abusers do. They isolate, control, make victims keep secrets from people who love them. You think he's abusing Blair, manipulating her. Emotionally, financially, yes. Look. Lawrence opened his laptop, pulled up Blair's Instagram. Her social media the past 6 months. I scrolled through. Picture after picture in expensive restaurants. designer handbags, new clothes, weekend trips to Charleston, Nashville, champagne brunches, rooftop bars, lifestyle that costs serious money. She's a real estate agent. The market's been slow. Her commissions can't cover this. They can't. Lawrence pulled up a credit report. Blair has 6 credit cards, all maxed out. Total debt $110,000. The number hit like a physical blow. 110,000 started accumulating 8 months ago, right when Pierce came back after Lorraine's death. Lawrence pointed at the screen. Look at the pattern. Shopping sprees every week. High-end stores. Always posting on social media. This isn't normal. This is someone spiraling. I thought about the Blair I'd raised. Practical girl who'd saved her allowance, worked part-time through college, careful with money. The woman I'd seen these past months. Expensive clothes. Distant conversations. That wasn't my daughter. That was someone else wearing her face. He did this, I said. Marcus did this to her. I think he encouraged the spending. Made her feel like she had to keep up appearances. Got her deep in debt until she became desperate. Then offered a solution. Your house. Your inheritance. If she could get control of your assets, all her problems would go away. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Pierce hadn't fallen in love with Blair. He'd targeted her, researched her. Found out about Lorraine's death, George's inheritance, the Tudor house worth over $500,000. He'd swooped in during grief, charmed her, isolated her, spent her into desperate debt, then pointed her at me like a weapon. And Blair, my beautiful, smart, stubborn daughter, had been so lost in grief and manipulation that she'd let him convince her stealing from her father was the answer. Does she know about his real name? His convictions? I don't think so. The name change was legal. She'd have no reason to look deeper. Marcus is careful. He wouldn't tell her about his past. He'd create a whole new identity. New story. New life. Lawrence closed the laptop. Randall, your daughter is a victim too. She's not the villain here. He is. I wanted to believe that, but I kept seeing her face at the New Year's party. The practiced smile, the cold kiss, the way she'd declared me incompetent in front of 50 people without a tremor in her voice. How much of that was Blair? How much was Marcus pulling strings? Lawrence gathered documents into the folder. Stewart needs all this. It's evidence. Proof this conservatorship is a scam by a career criminal. The judge will throw it out. And Blair, I don't know. That's up to the court. She filed the paperwork, made the accusations. Even if she was manipulated, there are consequences. I pulled the folder toward me, stared at Marcus Dunn's mugshot from 2018. He looked younger, harder. The smooth charm from our dinner table nowhere in this photograph. This was a predator caught mid-hunt. This was the man my daughter had married. This was the man trying to steal everything Lorraine had worked to protect. I closed the file. She's still my daughter, but this has to stop. I spent the next 10 days helping Stewart build our case. January 10th through 20th became a blur of meetings, document gathering, and preparation. Stewart had laid out a strategy to prove I was competent, through medical evidence and community testimony, then expose Pierce as a fraud. Simple in theory, exhausting in practice. We started with character witnesses. Barbara Glenn was first. Stewart and I drove to her house on a cold Tuesday morning. She invited us in, made tea, and listened, while Stewart explained what he needed. I've known Randall 30 years, she said without hesitation. He's sharp as ever, manages his own bills, drives himself everywhere, volunteers at the food bank twice a month. If Blair's claiming he's got dementia, she's lying or she's been lied to. Stewart took notes. Would you be willing to testify to that in court? Absolutely. Randall's a good man. What's happening to him is wrong. Kenneth Davis said essentially the same thing when we met him at the church that afternoon. So did Russell Hayes the next morning. Each conversation followed the same pattern shock at Blair's claims, immediate offers, to help stories about seeing me recently functioning perfectly well. I had coffee with Randall just 2 weeks ago, Russell told Stewart. We talked about current events, church finances, his plans for spring gardening. He was completely coherent, more coherent than some people half his age. By January 15th, Stewart had statements from 8 community members, all consistent, all emphatic, all willing to testify. Next came the medical evaluation. Dr. Nathan Cross had been my physician for 15 years. He'd treated my high blood pressure, monitored my cholesterol, given me my annual physicals. When I called and explained what was happening, his voice went cold. Blair's claiming you have dementia. That's absurd. You were in my office 3 months ago for your flu shot. We talked for 20 minutes. You were fine. I need it documented, I said. Officially, for court. Come in tomorrow. I'll do a full cognitive assessment. The examination took 2 hours. Memory tests, problem-solving exercises, questions about current events, recent conversations, daily routines. Dr. Cross was thorough professional and clearly annoyed that he had to prove something so obvious. When he finished, he handed me a letter on official letterhead. To whom it may concern, I have examined Randall Pierce and find no evidence of cognitive decline, dementia, or any condition that would impair his ability to manage his own affairs. Mr. Pierce demonstrates full mental competency consistent with a healthy adult of his age. That should do it, he said. And Randall, if you need me to testify, I'll be there. Stewart collected my medical records going back 15 years, annual checkups, medication lists, notes from every appointment. All of it documented a healthy, engaged patient with no cognitive issues whatsoever. This is strong, Stewart said as we reviewed the file. Very strong. No judge will look at this evidence and conclude you're incompetent. But on January 18th, we got bad news. Stewart called me into his office, expression grim. Marshall Crane filed an amended petition. He's added specific incidents, claims you've had episodes of confusion, forgotten appointments, gotten lost driving. All documented with dates and details. I stared at the paperwork. That's not true. None of that happened. I know. He's fabricating evidence. The question is whether he's doing it knowingly or whether Blair's feeding him false information. Can he do that? Just make things up? Unfortunately, attorneys file what their clients tell them. If Blair's claiming these incidents happened, Marshall's obligated to include them in the petition. Proving they're false is our job. Stewart flipped through pages. Look at this, he claims you forgot a doctor's appointment in November. But your medical records show you attended every scheduled appointment. He claims you got lost driving to the grocery store in December. But Barbara saw you at the store that week and said you were fine. So we can disprove it. Yes, but it means Marshall's playing dirty. He knows his case is weak, so he's trying to create doubt. Make the judge think maybe there's something to Blair's claims, even if the medical evidence says otherwise. I felt anger rising. Who is this Marshall Crane? Mid-50s, been practicing in Asheville about 20 years. Mostly family law divorces, custody disputes, estate conflicts. Not a terrible reputation, but not stellar either. The kind of attorney who will push ethical boundaries if the client's paying well enough. Is Pierce paying him? Probably. Blair's got $110,000 in debt. She's not hiring attorneys. My guess is Pierce or Marcus, whatever we're calling him, is bankrolling this whole operation. He's got experience with the legal system. He knows how to work it. Over the next 2 days, Stewart and I methodically dismantled every false claim in Marshall's amended petition. For each alleged incident, we found contradicting evidence. Calendar entries, receipts, witness statements. By January 20th, we had a counter-filing ready. "This is good work," Stewart said. "We've got medical evidence, community testimony, documentary proof that their claims are fabricated. The judge will see through this." What about Pierce? Do we bring up his criminal record? Absolutely. That's the final piece. Lawrence's investigation gives us everything we need. Marcus Dunn's real identity, his convictions, his pattern of targeting elderly victims. When the judge sees that this whole thing is a scam orchestrated by a career con artist, it's over. I sat in Stewart's office on January 20th reviewing the case file one last time. Medical records, witness statements, proof of Pierce's fraud, evidence of Blair's debt, everything we needed to win. 10 days until the hearing. 10 days to make sure I didn't lose everything Lorraine had worked to protect. Stewart closed the file. "Get some rest, Randall. January 28th is going to be a long day, but we're ready." I drove home as the sun set over the mountains, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks: confidence. Not certainty, there were no guarantees in court, but confidence that we'd done everything possible, that the truth was on our side, that Lorraine's protections would hold. 10 days until the hearing. I reviewed the evidence one more time. 3 days before the hearing, Blair called me. I almost didn't answer. January 25th. I was sitting in my living room reviewing Stewart's trial notes when my phone buzzed. Blair's name on the screen. My thumb hovered over the decline button. I answered. "Dad." Her voice sounded raw, desperate. "Dad, we need to talk." I said nothing. "Please, I know you're angry. I know what happened on New Year's was..." She stopped, breathed. "Can we meet just the two of us?" "No." "Dad, please. You declared me incompetent in front of 50 people. You filed legal documents claiming I can't manage my own life. You married a con artist and tried to steal everything your mother worked to protect." My voice was steady, cold. "There's nothing to talk about, Blair. You don't understand. It's not things are complicated. I understand perfectly. The hearing's in 3 days. You and your husband can explain everything to the judge." "He's not, Dad, please, if I could just..." I hung up. My hands shook. I set the phone down on the coffee table and stared at it like it might explode. Part of me wanted to call her back, wanted to hear what she had to say, wanted to believe there was some explanation that would make this make sense. But I couldn't. Not after what she'd done. Not with Marcus pulling her strings. The phone didn't ring again. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation. Blair's voice. The desperation in it. Was that real, or was it another manipulation? At 2 a.m., I gave up trying to sleep. Put on my robe and slippers, went downstairs. Made coffee I didn't drink. Stood at the kitchen window, looking out at the dark garden. I hadn't been out there since the morning I found Lorraine. 18 months. The garden had been her sanctuary, and after she died, I couldn't bear to look at it, let alone walk in it. But at 2 a.m. on January 26th, something pulled me toward the door. The night was cold, clear. Stars scattered across the sky like broken glass. I walked across frost-brittle grass to the spot where the roses grew. This was where she'd fallen. Right here among the English roses she'd planted 15 years ago. The pruning shears had been in her hand. She'd been doing what she loved. I knelt on the cold ground. "I miss you," I whispered to the darkness. "God, Lorraine, I miss you so much." The garden was silent. No wind, no animals. Just me and the ghosts of 18 months. Blair called today. She wanted to talk. I hung up on her. I closed my eyes. Was that right? Should I have listened? No answer. Just cold and silence. You saw this coming. You warned me. You protected me. My voice broke. I wish you were here. I wish you could tell me what to do. I sat there in the cold for a long time. Maybe 20 minutes. Maybe an hour. Time felt strange, but slowly something shifted. The panic that had been sitting on my chest since New Year's Eve loosened. The fear that I'd lose everything, the house, the money, my dignity, faded. Lorraine had seen Pierce for what he was after one dinner. She'd built legal protections that had held for 10 years. She'd left me a letter explaining everything. She'd given me weapons I didn't even know I had. She'd done her part. Now I had to do mine. I stood up, brushed frost from my robe, and went back inside. Found Lorraine's letter in the drawer where I'd been keeping it. Read it again by lamplight in the kitchen. You are stronger than you know, Randall Pierce. You know that the truth always wins eventually. Hold on to that. Hold on to the truth. The truth was simple. I wasn't incompetent. Blair was being manipulated. Pierce was a predator, and in 3 days, a judge would see all of that. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the drawer. At 6 a.m., I made fresh coffee. Real coffee this time, hot and strong. Drank it while watching the sun come up over the mountains. The sky turned from black to purple to gold, and by the time full daylight hit, I knew what I had to do. I went upstairs, took a long shower, shaved carefully. Found the suit I'd worn to Lorraine's funeral, the only suit I owned. Navy blue, slightly wrinkled from hanging in the closet for 18 months, but it would do. I put it on. White shirt, simple tie. Polished shoes I hadn't worn since the funeral. Looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like a man ready for battle. The next 2 days passed slowly. Stuart called with final preparations. Lawrence checked in. Barbara stopped by with a casserole I actually ate. The community was rallying. They knew what was happening. They were ready to fight for me. On the morning of January 28th, I woke before my alarm, put on the Navy suit again, made coffee, ate toast, did all the normal things people do before their lives might change forever. At 7:30, Stuart picked me up. "Ready?" he asked. I looked back at the Tudor house. George's house, Lorraine's house, my house standing solid in the morning light. 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, 3,500 square feet of memories and history and protection. I wasn't losing it. Not today. Not to Pierce. Not to anyone. At dawn, I put on my only suit and prepared for war. January 28th, 9 o'clock in the morning. I walked into Judge Thornton's courtroom. The room was smaller than I'd expected. Wood-paneled walls, high ceiling, American flag in the corner, rows of benches like church pews. Stuart led me to a table on the left side. I sat down, set my hands flat on the polished surface, and tried to control my breathing. Across the aisle, Blair sat next to Marshall Crane. She wore a dark blue dress, conservative and professional. Her hair was pulled back. No jewelry except her wedding ring, the one I hadn't known about until Lawrence found the certificate. She looked thin, tired. When our eyes met for a brief second, she looked away. Marshall Crane was exactly what I'd pictured from Stuart's description. Mid-50s, gray suit, expensive watch, the practiced confidence of a man who'd done this 100 times before. He leaned over to whisper something to Blair. She nodded without looking at him. Pierce wasn't there. Stuart had explained he couldn't be. This was a family matter, and he wasn't technically family in the eyes of the conservatorship petition. But I could feel his presence anyway. Every word Blair would say today, every lie she'd tell, that was him speaking through her. All rise. Judge Sarah Thornton entered from a side door. Late 50s silver hair pulled into a tight bun, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She had the look of a woman who'd heard every story and believed none of them until proven otherwise. We sat. Judge Thornton opened a folder, scanned the first page, and looked up over her glasses. This is a petition for conservatorship filed by Blair Pierce regarding her father, Randall Pierce. Ms. Pierce claims her father is no longer competent to manage his own affairs due to cognitive decline. She looked at Marshall. Mr. Crane, you may present your case. Marshall stood. Thank you, Your Honor. This is a difficult matter for my client, as I'm sure the court can appreciate. Ms. Pierce has watched her father deteriorate over the past 18 months following the death of her mother. What began as normal grief has progressed into something far more serious. Memory loss, confusion, inability to manage basic daily tasks. I wanted to stand up and shout that it was a lie, every word. But Stewart had been clear: stay quiet, stay calm, let the evidence speak. My client has documented numerous incidents, Marshall continued. Forgotten appointments, episodes of disorientation, inability to manage finances. She's tried to help informally, but Mr. Pierce's condition has reached a point where formal intervention is necessary for his own safety and well-being. Judge Thornton made notes. Call your first witness. The petitioner, Blair Pierce. Blair stood and walked to the witness stand. She was sworn in, sat down, folded her hands in her lap. Her voice when she spoke was steady. Too steady. Like she'd rehearsed this. Ms. Pierce. Marshall began gently. Can you describe your father's condition over the past year? It's been gradual, Blair said. After Mom died, Dad withdrew. That was normal grief, but over the months, I started noticing things. He'd forget we'd had conversations. He'd repeat himself. He stopped taking care of the house, stopped going to church, stopped seeing friends. Each word was a knife, each lie delivered in my daughter's voice. Can you give specific examples? Last November, he missed a doctor's appointment. When I asked about it, he insisted he'd gone, but the office said he never showed up. In December, a neighbor found him at the grocery store looking confused, said he couldn't remember how he'd gotten there. He stopped paying bills on time. The utilities almost got shut off. I glanced at Stewart. He was taking notes, his expression neutral. We'd prepared for this. Every claim she was making, we had evidence to disprove. Ms. Pierce, this must be very difficult for you. It is. Blair's voice caught. He's my father. I love him. But I can't stand by and watch him hurt himself through neglect. He needs help. Professional supervision. Someone to make sure he's eating, taking his medications, managing his affairs properly. Marshall nodded sympathetically. And the purpose of this conservatorship? To protect him, to make sure he's safe. That's all I want, for Dad to be safe and cared for. Thank you. No further questions. Judge Thornton looked at Stewart. Cross-examination. Stewart stood. His movements were deliberate, calm. He walked toward the witness stand and stopped a respectful distance from Blair. Miss Pierce, when was the last time you visited your father? Blair hesitated. I'm not sure exactly, approximately. A few months ago. How many months? 4 or 5. 5 months. Stewart let that hang in the air. So you haven't seen your father since August? I've been busy with work. I'm sure, but you're asking this court to declare your father incompetent based on observations from 5 months ago. I've talked to him on the phone. How often? Every few weeks. Every few weeks. Stewart consulted his notes. Ms. Pierce, where were you during those 5 months when you weren't visiting your father or calling him regularly? Blair's face tightened. That's not relevant. I think it is. Where were you, Ms. Pierce? Marshall stood. Objection. Relevance. Your Honor. Stewart said calmly. The petitioner's relationship with her father and her motivations for filing this petition are absolutely relevant. Judge Thornton considered. Overruled. Answer the question, Ms. Pierce. Blair's jaw set. I was managing my own life, my career, my relationships. Your relationships. Stewart pulled a document from his folder. Ms. Pierce, are you married? The courtroom went still. Blair didn't answer. Ms. Pierce, are you married? Yes. Her voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Yes, I'm married. To whom? Pierce Donovan. And when did this marriage take place? August 15th. August 15th, 2024. 5 months ago. The same 5 months you claim to have been too busy to visit your father. Stewart's voice was gentle, relentless. Did you invite your father to your wedding? No. Did you tell him about your marriage? No. Why not? Blair looked at Marshall, looked at the judge, looked anywhere but at me. It was complicated. Complicated. Stewart set down the marriage certificate on the evidence table. Ms. Pierce, does your father know your husband's real name? Marshall shot to his feet. Objection! What does this have to do with? Goes to motive, Your Honor, and credibility of the witness. Judge Thornton leaned forward, eyes sharp. I'll allow it. Answer the question, Ms. Pierce. Blair's face had gone pale. I don't understand. Your husband's legal name. What is it? Pierce Alexander Donovan. And before 2021, what was his name before he legally changed it in March of 2021? The silence was deafening. The judge leaned forward, and Blair's face went pale. After the lunch recess, Stewart called Dr. Nathan Cross to the stand. It was 1:30 p.m. The morning session had ended with Blair unable to answer Stewart's question about Pierce's real name. Judge Thornton had called recess, giving everyone 90 minutes to regroup. Blair had disappeared immediately. I'd eaten a sandwich in Stewart's office that tasted like cardboard. Now we were back. Blair sat rigid beside Marshall Crane, eyes red. Pierce still wasn't in the courtroom, but I wondered how long that would last. Dr. Cross took the oath and sat down. He looked exactly like what he was, a competent physician who'd been practicing medicine for 30 years and didn't appreciate being dragged into court to state the obvious. Dr. Cross, Stewart began. How long have you been Mr. Pierce's physician? 15 years. And in that time, have you ever observed any cognitive decline? No, none whatsoever. Did you recently examine Mr. Pierce specifically to assess his mental competency? I did. Last week at your request, I performed a full cognitive evaluation, memory tests, problem-solving exercises, current events, awareness, daily living activities, assessment. And your findings, Doctor? Cross looked directly at the judge. Mr. Pierce shows no signs of dementia, Alzheimer's, or any other cognitive impairment. His mental function is entirely normal for a healthy adult his age. The claims that he's incompetent are medically baseless. Stewart introduced Dr. Cross's report and 15 years of medical records into evidence. The judge examined them while Stewart continued. Dr. Cross, the petitioner, claims Mr. Pierce has forgotten appointments, become confused, struggled with basic tasks. Do your records support any of that? No, Mr. Pierce has attended every scheduled appointment. Our conversations have always been coherent and appropriate. 3 months ago, we discussed current political events, his volunteer work, and his plans for maintaining the house. He was entirely lucid. Thank you, Doctor. No further questions. Marshal Crane declined to cross-examine. What could he say? The medical evidence was ironclad. Stewart returned to our table, pulled out a thick folder, and stood again. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce evidence regarding the true nature of this conservatorship petition. Judge Thornton nodded. Proceed. The court has heard Ms. Pierce's claims about her father's incompetence. What the court hasn't heard is why she's really here. Stewart approached the bench with documents. Yeah, this is a background investigation into Pierce Donovan, Ms. Pierce's husband. Blair's head snapped up. Pierce Alexander Donovan is not his birth name. He legally changed it in March 2021. His real name is Marcus James Dunn. Born April 12, 1986. Stewart handed copies to the judge and marshal. Mr. Dunn has 2 prior fraud convictions. The courtroom was dead silent. In 2018, Marcus Dunn was convicted of real estate fraud in Mecklenburg County. He posed as an investment advisor and convinced 4 elderly homeowners to take out reverse mortgages with him as the beneficiary. All 4 victims lost their homes. He served 18 months in prison. I watched Blair's face. She'd gone white. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. In 2021, Mr. Dunn was convicted of investment fraud in Wake County. He targeted 3 widows, and widowers gained access to their retirement accounts and stole over $200,000. He served another 2 years. Stewart laid out documents, court records, mugshots, victim impact statements, evidence of a career predator. Mr. Dunn was released from prison in May 2023. 6 months later, he began dating Ms. Pierce, whose mother had recently died and whose father had just inherited $890,000. Blair made a small sound. Not quite a sob. Marshall leaned over to whisper to her, but she shook her head violently. Your Honor, I'd like to call FBI Special Agent Linda Martinez. A woman in a dark suit stood from the back of the courtroom and came forward. She was sworn in, stated her credentials: 15 years with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Agent Martinez, is the FBI aware of Marcus Dunn? Yes. We have an active investigation into his activities. Can you tell the court what that investigation involves? Mr. Dunn is suspected in connection with at least 6 cases of elder financial abuse across North Carolina and South Carolina. Total estimated losses exceed $2.4 million. We've been building a case for the past 8 months. 6 cases, $2.4 million. The numbers hit like physical blows. And what is Mr. Dunn's typical pattern? He targets vulnerable individuals, usually widows or widowers who've recently inherited significant assets. He establishes a romantic relationship with a family member, typically an adult child. He isolates that family member, creates financial desperation through excessive spending, then manipulates them into helping him access the inheritance. Agent Martinez's words described exactly what had happened to Blair. Exactly what had happened to me. Is Mr. Dunn currently in this jurisdiction? We believe so, yes. Stewart nodded. Thank you, Agent Martinez. He turned back to the judge and his voice was quiet but clear. Your Honor, this conservatorship petition isn't about protecting Randall Pierce from cognitive decline. It's a scheme orchestrated by a career criminal to steal an inheritance. Ms. Pierce isn't acting in her father's best interests. She's being manipulated by a predator who's done this before and will do it again. Judge Thornton's expression was stone. She looked at Marshall Crane. Mr. Crane, did you know about your client's husband's criminal history? Marshall stood slowly. His face had lost all color. No, Your Honor, I was not aware. Did you verify any of the claims in your petition? I relied on my client's representations, which were lies. The judge's voice cut like a blade. Lies designed to facilitate fraud. She looked at Blair, who was crying now, shoulders shaking. Ms. Pierce, did you know about your husband's real identity? Blair shook her head, unable to speak. Did you know about his criminal record? No. A whisper. Then you've been used. But that doesn't excuse filing false claims against your father. Judge Thornton closed the file in front of her. This petition is denied. Mr. Pierce is clearly competent to manage his own affairs. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the State Bar for investigation into Mr. Crane's conduct. Marshall Crane sat down heavily. Blair stood up, pushed past him, and ran from the courtroom. If that FBI testimony sent chills down your spine and you're still watching comment 1 right now, seriously, I love knowing you're here. A gentle heads up as we move forward. This story blends authentic issues with fictionalized scenarios. Not every detail reflects literal reality, though the themes are deeply real. If you're looking for pure documentary, you might want to close out here. Still with me, good. Because what happens next is where justice meets heartbreak. The courtroom was silent after Blair left. Then Stewart called his final witnesses. It was 3 o'clock. Judge Thornton had denied the petition, but Stewart wanted to seal the record, show not just that I was competent, but that the whole thing had been a coordinated attack. I call Barbara Glenn. Barbara took the stand, her expression fierce. She'd known me 30 years, watched me teach, watched me grieve, watched me survive. Ms. Glenn, how often do you see Mr. Pierce? At least twice a week. I bring him groceries, we have coffee. He helps at the food bank every other Saturday. And in your observations, does he show any signs of cognitive decline? Absolutely not. Randall's sharp as he's ever been, manages his bills, drives himself everywhere, volunteers in the community. If anything, he's more engaged now than he was right after Lorraine passed. Kenneth Davis said the same. So did Russell Hayes. 3 pillars of the Asheville community, all testifying that I was exactly what Dr. Cross had confirmed, a competent, healthy adult being targeted by criminals. Then Stewart called Marcus Stone. Eugene Brooks' grandson walked to the stand carrying his phone. 25 years old, worked in software, had that quiet confidence of someone who knew he held evidence that mattered. Mr. Stone, were you present at Mr. Pierce's home on December 31st? Yes, sir. New Year's Eve party. My grandfather and I were both there. Did you observe anything unusual? I recorded something. Marcus held up his phone. Ms. Pierce made an announcement. I thought it was weird, so I started filming. Stewart introduced the video into evidence. The bailiff set up a screen. I didn't want to watch, didn't want to relive that moment, but I couldn't look away. There I was on the screen, standing in my own living room, surrounded by 50 people I'd known for years, and there was Blair standing on the fireplace hearth glass, in hand voice clear and practiced. My father has been struggling. Significant cognitive decline. Effective immediately, I'll be taking over as his conservator. I watched my own face in the video. The confusion, The shock, the complete inability to process what was happening. 50 pairs of eyes turning toward me, the room going silent. The video ended. Judge Thornton's expression was granite. Mr. Crane, your client humiliated her father publicly based on false claims, then filed legal documents to strip him of his rights, and you helped her do it. Marshal Crane looked like he wanted to disappear. Stewart stood for closing arguments. Your Honor, this case is straightforward. Randall Pierce is a competent adult. The medical evidence proves it. The community testimony proves it. The only evidence suggesting otherwise comes from a daughter who hasn't visited him in 5 months, and a convicted fraudster with $2.4 million in suspected thefts. He gestured to the stack of evidence on the table. This isn't about protecting Mr. Pierce. This is elder abuse, calculated, deliberate, and executed by a career criminal who saw a vulnerable widower with assets and decided to take everything. But he failed, because 10 years ago, Lorraine Pierce saw exactly this scenario coming and built legal protections that held. Because Mr. Pierce has a community that knows him and believes in him, and because the truth matters. Stewart sat down. Marshal Crane stood for his closing, but what could he say? His case had disintegrated. Blair had run from the courtroom. The evidence was overwhelming. Your Honor, my client. I believed my client's representations. I had no knowledge of... Judge Thornton held up her hand. Mr. Crane, you filed a petition without verifying basic facts. You alleged incompetence without medical evidence. You attempted to strip a man of his rights based on lies. That's not zealous advocacy. That's negligence at best, complicity at worst. She opened her ruling folder. I find that Randall Pierce is fully competent to manage his own affairs. The petition for conservatorship is denied in its entirety. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the North Carolina State Bar for investigation into Mr. Crane's conduct. This hearing is concluded. The gavel came down. Stewart gripped my shoulder. It's over. You won. People from the gallery, Barbara, Kenneth, Russell, Lawrence, came forward to shake my hand, hug me, tell me they'd known all along this was wrong. I stood there numb, feeling like I should be happy, but mostly just feeling exhausted. At 5 p.m., Stewart drove me home. The Tudor house stood exactly as I'd left it 28 days ago. Solid, unchanged, still mine. Lawrence was waiting on the porch with a casserole from Barbara and news that Pierce had vanished. Blair, too. No one had seen either of them since the hearing ended. FBI's looking, Lawrence said. Marcus Dunn's a wanted man now. They'll find him. I went inside. The house smelled stale, closed up. I opened windows, let fresh air in, walked through rooms that felt simultaneously familiar and foreign. In the kitchen, I found Lorraine's letter still in the drawer where I'd left it. Read it one more time. You are stronger than you know. The truth always wins eventually. She'd been right. That night, I slept in my own bed for the first time in a month. Didn't sleep well, too much adrenaline, too many emotions, but I was home. 2 weeks later, the FBI called. They'd found Pierce. On February 15th, the FBI called me. They'd arrested Pierce in Tampa, Florida. I was sitting at my kitchen table drinking morning coffee when my phone rang. Special Agent Martinez, the woman who'd testified at the hearing. Mr. Pierce, I wanted to let you know personally. We apprehended Marcus Dunn yesterday evening at a hotel near the Tampa airport. He had cash, fake IDs, and a plane ticket to Mexico. My hand tightened around the phone. He was running. He was. But we'd been tracking him since the hearing. The moment Judge Thornton denied the conservatorship, we moved in. He's in federal custody now. What are the charges? Wire fraud, elder financial abuse, identity theft. Multiple counts. And Mr. Pierce. Her voice softened. You're not his only victim. We've identified 6 cases total across 4 states. Combined losses exceed $2.4 million. 6 victims. 6 families like mine. People who'd worked their whole lives lost someone they loved and had Marcus Dunn sweep in to take everything they had left. What about Blair? The question hurt to ask. We've interviewed her extensively. She's not being charged. Based on the evidence, we believe she was a victim of manipulation rather than an active participant. She genuinely didn't know about his criminal history or his real name. She's cooperating fully with the investigation. Cooperating. That meant talking to the FBI, admitting what had happened, facing what she'd done even if she'd been manipulated into doing it. Where is she? I can't disclose that, sir. But she's safe. 5 days later, Lawrence called with news. Blair's in Atlanta, staying with a college friend. She's broke maxed credit cards, no savings, filed for bankruptcy last week. I didn't know what to feel. Relief that she was alive. Anger that she'd let it get this far. Grief for the daughter I'd raised, who'd been twisted into someone I didn't recognize. All of it. None of it. Everything at once. In March, Marcus Dunn was arraigned in federal court. The charges were extensive wire fraud, elder abuse, identity theft, conspiracy. The prosecutor requested he be held without bail, citing flight risk. The judge agreed. April brought letters. Not from Blair, I heard nothing from her, but from the other victims. 6 families whose lives Marcus had destroyed before he got to mine. A widow in Charleston who'd lost her late husband's life insurance to Marcus's investment opportunities. A retired couple in Greenville who'd nearly lost their home to a reverse mortgage scheme. A widower in Columbia who'd given Marcus power of attorney and watched his retirement savings disappear. Each letter said essentially the same thing. Thank you for standing up. Thank you for fighting back. Because of you, he can't hurt anyone else. I kept the letters in a folder on my kitchen table, read them when the guilt got too heavy. The guilt that I should have seen through Marcus earlier, should have protected Blair better, should have listened to Lorraine's warnings the first time, instead of dismissing them as paranoia. The trial was set for May. Stewart kept me updated. The prosecution's case was airtight. 6 victims. Clear pattern of behavior. Financial records showing exactly where the money had gone. Marcus's criminal history making it impossible for him to claim this was a first offense. On May 15, 2025, Marcus Dunn was sentenced in federal court. 12 years. Stewart called me with the news. It's over, Randall. 12 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole before serving at least 10. Plus restitution orders for all 6 victims. He'll be 70 before he sees freedom again. 12 years. It didn't undo what he'd done. Didn't give back the months Blair and I had lost. Didn't erase the humiliation of New Year's Eve or the terror of thinking I'd lose everything Lorraine had protected. But it was something. It was justice. And it meant Marcus couldn't hurt anyone else. I sat in my kitchen that evening, watching the sun set over the mountains, thinking about all the families whose letters I'd read. 6 cases. $2.4 million. Lives destroyed. But now at least there was accountability. Consequences. A predator taken off the streets. I thought about Blair. Still in Atlanta. Still broke. Still my daughter, even after everything. The FBI had said she was a victim. The evidence supported that. Marcus had targeted her specifically because of me, because of the inheritance, because she was vulnerable after Lorraine's death. He'd love-bombed her, isolated her, spent her into desperate debt, and then pointed her at me like a weapon. But she'd still done it. Still stood up at that party. still filed the paperwork, still tried to take everything. How do you reconcile that? How do you separate the daughter you raised from the person who betrayed you? Knowing that person was being controlled by someone else, I didn't have an answer. Part of me felt vindicated. Marcus was in prison. The conservatorship had been thrown out. The house was still mine. Lorraine's protections had held. I'd won, but another part of me just felt hollow, because Blair was still out there, broken, bankrupt, living with the consequences of choices she'd made while under Marcus's influence, and I didn't know if we'd ever be able to come back from this. I didn't know if I even wanted to try. Pierce was gone, but my daughter was still out there somewhere broken. In March, a reporter from the Asheville Citizen-Times called me. I almost didn't answer. I'd spent 2 months avoiding attention, trying to process everything that had happened. But something about the reporter's voicemail made me call back. "Mr. Pierce, I'd like to do a story about your case. Not the sensational parts, the human part. How you survived. What people can learn from what happened to you." I thought about it for a day, then agreed. The interview took 2 hours. We sat in my living room, the same room where Blair had humiliated me on New Year's Eve, and I told the story. Lorraine's warnings, the sealed letter, the conservatorship hearing, Marcus Dunn's arrest, the whole terrible arc of it. The article ran on March 10th. Retired teacher defeats elder abuse scheme, how one man's dead wife saved him from a con artist. It wasn't sensationalized. The reporter had written it with dignity. Focused on the warning signs, isolation, financial manipulation, rapid relationship progression after a death in the family. Made me sound braver than I felt. 3 days later, Asheville Senior Center called. "Mr. Pierce, we'd like you to speak to our members. Share your experience. A lot of our folks are widows and widowers. They need to hear this." I'd taught history for 35 years, stood in front of classrooms and made the past come alive. But standing in front of 150 senior citizens at the community center on March 20th felt different. This wasn't history. This was my life. I told them everything. How Marcus had targeted Blair, how he'd isolated her, how the debt had mounted, how the conservatorship petition was designed to steal everything. "The warning signs are always there," I said. "Someone who moves too fast, who asks too many questions about money, who tries to separate you from family and friends, who creates urgency, you need to act now, you can't tell anyone, trust me instead of them." Hands went up. Questions. Stories. A woman whose son's girlfriend had tried something similar. A man whose daughter's new husband kept asking about the house. People who'd felt that same unease I'd felt when Pierce first shook my hand. "Trust your instincts," I told them. "If something feels wrong, it probably is. And protect yourself legally. Irrevocable trusts. Clear documentation. Don't wait until it's too late." After the presentation, people lined up to talk to me, share their own experiences, ask for advice, thank me for speaking up. That's when Stewart approached me. "Randall, what you just did, that was powerful. What if we made it bigger?" 2 weeks later, we established the Elder Protection Fund, small nonprofit. Stewart handled the legal structure. I became the public face. Our mission: educate seniors about financial exploitation and provide resources to fight back. By April, I was speaking twice a month. Senior centers, church groups, community organizations. Always the same message: protect yourself. Trust your instincts, don't let predators win. By summer, we'd helped 60 families. Some were already victims trying to recover. Others had spotted warning signs early thanks to our presentations. One woman called me in tears. "My daughter's boyfriend was doing exactly what you described. I asked him to leave. She's angry now, but thank you. You saved me." Letters arrived weekly. Thank you notes. Stories of near misses, requests for help. Each one reminded me why this mattered. In May, something unexpected happened. I went back to the garden. Barbara Glenn had been asking for months. "Randall, those roses need pruning." That garden was Lorraine's pride. You can't just let it die. I'd been avoiding it. The spot where I'd found her. The roses she'd been pruning when her heart stopped. It hurt too much. But one Saturday morning, Barbara showed up with gloves and pruning shears. "Come on, I'll help. You don't have to do this alone." We worked side by side for 3 hours. Cut back dead growth. Pulled weeds. Cleared the flagstone paths. Barbara talked about her own garden, about spring planting, about nothing important. By noon, the garden looked better, not perfect. It would take months to fully restore what 18 months of neglect had destroyed, but better. "See?" Barbara said. "It's still here, still beautiful. Just needed some attention." Over the following months, I worked in the garden twice a week. Sometimes alone, sometimes with Barbara. The perennials came back. The roses bloomed, not as full as they'd been under Lorraine's care, but they bloomed. The lavender she'd planted 15 years ago filled the air with fragrance. One morning in October, I knelt in the exact spot where I'd found her, where I'd done CPR on frost-cold ground while she slipped away. It didn't hurt as much anymore. The garden wasn't a crime scene. It was a garden again. But there was still one wound that wouldn't heal. I hadn't heard from Blair since the trial. No calls, no letters, nothing. Lawrence said she was still in Atlanta, still broke, still putting her life back together. Part of me wanted to reach out. Part of me wanted to forgive, to rebuild, to find some way back to being father and daughter. But another part remembered New Year's Eve, remembered the conservatorship petition, remembered my daughter trying to take everything Lorraine had protected. How do you come back from that? I didn't know. The garden was healing. I was healing. 60 families were safer because of what I'd been through. Marcus was in prison. Justice had been served. But one wound remained open, Blair. On March 15, 2025, I received a letter from my daughter. It arrived in a cream-colored envelope with no return address. I recognized Blair's handwriting immediately, the careful loops she'd learned in elementary school. My hands trembled as I carried it to the kitchen table. I sat there for 10 minutes before I could open it. The letter was 3 pages long, handwritten on notebook paper. "Dad, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if I have the right to ask, but I need to say these things even if you throw this away. I'm sorry. I know those words aren't enough. They can't undo what I did on New Year's Eve. They can't erase the conservatorship petition or the lies Marshall told in court. They can't take back the humiliation. But they're all I have. I've been in therapy twice a week for 8 months. My therapist says I need to take responsibility for my choices, not just blame Marcus. She's right. I chose to listen to him instead of you and Mom. I chose to believe his lies. I chose to sign that petition and testify against you. Those were my choices, not his. Mine. I filed for bankruptcy in March. 6 credit cards all maxed out. $110,000 in debt. I'm on a payment plan now. It'll take years, but I'm trying. I got a job at a nonprofit in Atlanta helping domestic violence survivors. The irony isn't lost on me. I spent 18 months being controlled, and now I'm helping other women who went through the same thing. I should have listened to Mom. She saw Marcus for what he was from the beginning. She tried to warn me, and I got angry. I accused her of being judgmental. The last real conversation I had with her 3 weeks before she died ended in an argument about Marcus. I've replayed that conversation 1,000 times. If I had listened to her, if I had trusted her instincts, she might have died knowing I was safe. Instead, she died worried, knowing Marcus was dangerous. I can't forgive myself for that, Dad. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't think I deserve that. But I wanted you to know I'm trying to become someone better. I'm trying to become someone Mom would have been proud of. I don't expect you to respond. But if you ever want to talk, not now, maybe not for years, but someday I'll be here. I love you, Dad. I'm so sorry I forgot how to show it. Blair. I read the letter 3 times that evening. Then I folded it and placed it in my desk drawer next to Lorraine's letter, the one that had saved everything. I didn't respond immediately. The wound was still too raw. But every few days I would take out Blair's letter and read it again, looking for manipulation or deception. I never found it. The letter felt genuine. As the days passed, I thought about what Lorraine would want. She had loved our daughter with fierce intensity. Her letter had been written not just to protect me, but to protect Blair too, to make sure Marcus couldn't use her to steal from both of us. On April 14th, I made a decision. Tomorrow would be exactly 14 months since I'd found Lorraine in the garden. It seemed like the right day to try building something new. On the morning of April 15th, 2025, I drove to Mana Food Bank. I'd been volunteering there once a week since February, sorting donations and packing boxes for families in need. I arrived at 8:30. The coordinator, Sandra, greeted me cheerfully. Randall, big delivery coming at 9. We'll need all hands on deck. I was carrying canned vegetables to storage when I saw her. Blair stood at the sorting table in jeans and an old sweatshirt, organizing pasta boxes with careful precision. She looked thinner with dark circles under her eyes. She looked up and saw me. Her face went pale. Dad, she whispered. I set down my box. Blair. Sandra appeared at my elbow. Oh, good, you two know each other. Blair just started last week. Blair's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know you volunteered here. I didn't know you were in Asheville, I said quietly. Sandra sensed the tension. Why don't you two take a break? There's a quiet office in the back. We sat across from each other in a small room lined with filing cabinets. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. I got your letter, I said finally. Blair's breath caught. I didn't think you'd read it. I read it several times. I meant every word. Her voice was soft. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know. I leaned forward. Blair, I've spent the past month trying to understand how we got here, how we went from being a family to this. I'm so sorry. Let me finish. My voice was steady. I've been angry, angrier than I've ever been. What you did on New Year's Eve, standing up and saying I was incompetent, trying to take control of my life, that was cruel. It was wrong. Tears streamed down her face. I know. But your mother loved you, I continued. And she would want me to try. Not to forget. Not to pretend it didn't hurt. But to try. Blair covered her face, shoulders shaking. I don't deserve that. Maybe not, I said. But I'm going to try anyway. Not today. Maybe not even this year. But I'll try. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you, Dad. We talked for 20 minutes. She told me about therapy, her job, the slow process of rebuilding. I told her about the Elder Protection Fund, the families I'd helped learning to live without Lorraine. When we stood to leave, Blair hesitated. Can I call you maybe once a month? Yeah, I said. That would be okay. There was no hug, no grand promises, but it was a beginning. Over the next 5 months, Blair and I took small steps toward healing. In May, we met for coffee twice. The first time was at a small cafe near the food bank, neutral territory for both of us. I arrived 10 minutes early and sat at a corner table, my hands wrapped around a mug I hadn't yet tasted. When Blair walked in, I saw the same nervousness in her face that I felt in my chest. We sat across from each other with steaming mugs between us, and the conversation was stilted, careful. She told me about her work at the nonprofit, how she'd been assigned to help a woman named Teresa escape an abusive relationship, how Teresa reminded her of herself. I told her about a family I'd helped identify a financial scam, an elderly couple who'd nearly lost their home to a fake reverse mortgage scheme. We were polite strangers relearning how to talk. When the hour was up, we said goodbye in the parking lot. No hug, just a quiet, "See you soon," that felt like a promise neither of us was quite ready to make. The second coffee meeting 2 weeks later was slightly easier. Blair smiled when I mentioned that Barbara Glenn had asked about her. "Tell her I said hello," Blair said quietly. "Tell her I'm doing better." "She'd like to hear that," I said. "She's been worried about you." "A lot of people have been," Blair said, looking down at her coffee. "I don't blame them." It was a small thing, that acknowledgement, but it felt like progress. In June, Blair asked if she could see the house. I hesitated. The house held so many memories, good ones and terrible ones. The living room where Blair had humiliated me. The kitchen where Lorraine had cooked Sunday dinners. The hallway where Blair's school photos still hung on the wall. But I agreed. She arrived on a Saturday morning, parking in the driveway and sitting in her car for a full minute before getting out. I watched from the window, my heart aching at her uncertainty. When she finally emerged, she walked slowly up the path, her eyes taking in the Tudor facade, the flower boxes I'd replanted in April, the brass door knocker Lorraine had polished every week. We walked through the house together. She paused in the living room, looking at the spot where she'd stood on New Year's Eve and announced to 50 people that I was incompetent. Her hand went to her mouth. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know," I said. We moved through the house slowly. She ran her hand along the banister Lorraine had refinished when Blair was in college. She looked at the family photos in the hallway, Blair at 8 years old, with her front teeth missing, Blair at 16, in her prom dress, Blair at 22, holding her college diploma. "I don't know how you can stand to look at me," she said. "You're my daughter," I said simply. "That hasn't changed." She didn't go into the garden. She stood at the back door, looking out at the roses through the glass, but she couldn't bring herself to step outside. The garden was where Lorraine had died, where Blair and I had worked together for years before everything fell apart. "Maybe next time," she said, her voice thick. "Maybe," I agreed. In July, I invited her to dinner. "I'll cook," I offered. "No," Blair said. "Let me, please." She arrived with grocery bags and spent 2 hours in the kitchen preparing Lorraine's pot roast recipe. I sat at the kitchen table listening to the sounds of her moving around the space, the clink of pans, the running water, the timer beeping. It reminded me of Sunday afternoons when Lorraine and Blair would cook together while I read the newspaper. The meal wasn't perfect. The carrots were a little overdone, the potatoes slightly underseasoned, and the gravy was thinner than Lorraine's had been. But it was the first meal Blair had cooked in nearly 2 years, and we ate every bite. "Mom would have added more time," Blair said, looking at her plate. "She would have," I agreed, "but she'd be proud you tried." Blair's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "Do you think she'd forgive me?" I thought about Lorraine's letter, about how fiercely she'd loved Blair, even while trying to protect me from Marcus. "Yes," I said. "She already has." In August, Blair finally asked about the garden. We were sitting on the back porch after dinner watching the sun set over the roses. "Is it doing okay?" she asked quietly. "It needs work," I admitted. "Barbara helps when she can, but it's a lot for me alone. Your mother always knew exactly what each plant needed. I'm still learning." Blair was quiet for a long moment. Then, could I? She hesitated. Could I help? The next Saturday, we worked side by side in the garden for the first time since Lorraine's death. Blair wore her mother's old gardening gloves, the leather soft and worn. She pruned the roses with the careful technique Lorraine had taught her years ago, cutting at a 45-degree angle just above the outward-facing bud. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. The quiet was peaceful, not awkward. Birds sang in the oak tree. The smell of earth and roses filled the air. It felt like coming home. As the sun began to set, Blair stood and brushed dirt from her knees. "Thank you for letting me help." "Thank you for coming," I said. On September 20th, as Blair was leaving after another afternoon in the garden, she paused at her car. She turned back to me, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. It was the first hug we'd shared in 18 months. I felt her shoulders shake as she cried against my chest, and I held her the way I used to when she was small and the world felt too big and frightening. "I love you, Dad," she whispered. "I love you too, sweetheart," I said. When she pulled away, both of us were crying. But something had shifted. The wall between us, while not gone entirely, had cracked open wide enough to let light through. Over the next few weeks, Blair visited more often. We worked in the garden together, shared meals, talked about safe topics, and occasionally ventured into harder ones. She told me more about her therapy, about learning to recognize manipulation, about rebuilding her sense of self. I told her about the families I'd helped through the Elder Protection Fund, about finding purpose in teaching others to protect themselves. Trust was growing slowly but surely, like the roses we tended together. In late September, Blair called. "A special day is approaching," she said carefully. "Would it be okay if I came to visit?" I knew what day she meant. "Yes," I said. "I'd like that." Blair arrived at 10 o'clock in the morning on that special day with a carefully wrapped gift. I'd been awake since dawn, nervous in a way I hadn't felt in months. October 15th marked 21 months since Lorraine's death, and somehow Blair had known this date would matter to me. Not Father's Day that had come and gone in June without acknowledgement from either of us, but this quiet milestone, this marker of time passing, and wounds slowly healing. She parked in the driveway and sat for a moment before getting out. I watched from the window, recognizing the hesitation. Even after 5 months of coffee meetings and garden work and careful reconciliation, big moments still required courage. When she finally emerged, she carried a flat package wrapped in cream-colored paper. She walked up the path with purpose, and when I opened the door, she smiled a real smile, the kind I hadn't seen in years. "Hi," she said. "Hi, sweetheart," I said. The endearment slipped out naturally, and neither of us flinched at it. We sat in the living room, and she handed me the package. "I've been working on this for a while," she said. "I hope it's okay." My hands shook as I unwrapped it. Inside was a wooden frame, simple and elegant, holding a photograph I'd forgotten existed. It was us. All three of us. Lorraine, Blair, and me standing in the garden on a spring day in 2015. Lorraine's arm was around Blair's shoulders. I stood beside them, holding gardening shears, dirt on my hands. We were all laughing at something, probably one of Lorraine's terrible puns. The roses bloomed behind us in full glory. I couldn't speak. My throat closed up, and tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. "Dad!" Blair's voice broke. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "No," I managed. "It's perfect. It's..." I looked at the photo again, at Lorraine's smile, at the way Blair leaned into her mother, at the casual happiness captured in that single moment. "Thank you." Blair moved to sit beside me on the couch. We looked at the photo together in silence. After a moment, she rested her head on my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around her the way I used to when she was small. "I miss her so much," Blair Blair whispered. Me too, I said. We sat like that for a long time, grieving together in a way we hadn't been able to before. All the anger and betrayal that had stood between us seemed smaller, somehow dwarfed by the enormity of our shared loss. Finally, Blair sat up and wiped her eyes. I was thinking maybe we could work in the garden today if you're up for it. I'd like that, I said. We spent the rest of the morning outside. The October air was crisp and cool, perfect for working. The roses needed deadheading before winter, and several beds needed mulching. Blair had brought her own gloves this time, new ones, not Lorraine's, and we worked side by side in comfortable silence. After an hour, I called her over to the largest rose bush, a David Austin variety Lorraine had planted 15 years ago. Let me show you something your mother taught me, I said. I demonstrated the proper technique for pruning the 45-degree angle cut, just above an outward-facing bud, the way to remove dead wood without damaging healthy canes, the importance of clean, sharp shears to prevent disease. Blair watched intently, then tried it herself. Her first cut was tentative, but her second was confident. Like this, perfect, I said. Just like your mother used to do it. We worked through the roses together, and I found myself telling Blair stories about Lorraine, how she'd mail-ordered bare root roses and nursed them through their first season, how she'd spent hours researching disease-resistant varieties, how she'd sung to the plants when she thought no one was listening. She really did that, Blair asked, laughing. Every morning, I confirmed. Usually Frank Sinatra songs. Blair laughed again, a full, genuine sound that echoed through the garden. I realized it was the first real laughter I'd heard from her in 2 years. The sound made my chest ache in the best way. What else did I miss? She asked quietly. What else don't I know about her? So I told her. Story after story as we pruned roses and pulled weeds and raked leaves. I told her about Lorraine's terrible cooking experiments in her 60s, about the time she'd accidentally dyed all our towels pink, about how she'd cried during every episode of any cooking competition show. Blair soaked it all in, sometimes laughing, sometimes wiping away tears. She added her own memories, childhood moments I'd forgotten, conversations she'd had with her mother that I'd never heard about. We built a bridge between us, using Lorraine's memory as the foundation. Around 2 o'clock, Blair pointed to an empty bed near the back fence. What are you planning to plant there? I haven't decided, I admitted. Your mother always handled the planning. What about lavender? Blair suggested. Mom always said she wanted to add more lavender. She loved the smell. Lavender it is, I said. We drove to the garden center together and picked out 6 lavender plants, a mix of English and French varieties that would bloom at different times. Back home, we prepared the soil and planted them carefully, Blair reading the care instructions aloud while I dug the holes. As we tamped down the soil around the last plant, Blair sat back on her heels. She would have liked this, she said softly. She would have, I agreed. She would have liked having you here. Blair looked at me, her eyes bright with tears. Do you think she's watching? I don't know, I said honestly, but I hope so. As the sun began to set, we stood in the garden admiring our work. The roses were properly pruned for winter. The beds were mulched. The new lavender plants stood in neat rows, their gray-green foliage soft in the fading light. Stay for dinner, I said. Blair hesitated only a moment. I'd like that. We went inside and made spaghetti together, nothing fancy, just pasta and jarred sauce and a salad from the grocery store. We ate at the kitchen table and talked about simple things. Her work, my speaking engagements, the families we were helping through our separate efforts. As we were cleaning up, Blair paused with a dish towel in her hands. Thank you for today, she said. Thank you for letting me back in. Thank you for coming back, I said. She smiled, and in that moment she looked so much like Lorraine that it took my breath away. I should head back to Atlanta, she said. But maybe I could come back next weekend. We could finish winterizing the garden. I'd like that, I said. At the door, we hugged easily now, without the weight of all our history pressing down on us. I love you, Dad, she said. That night, for the first time in nearly 2 years, my daughter called me Dad. If that garden scene touched something in you and you're still here, leave healing in the comments. I need to know who made it to this turning point with me. As we approach the final stretch, this narrative uses creative storytelling to explore forgiveness and family healing. Some moments are crafted rather than documented. If that artistic license bothers you, you're welcome to stop here. But if you want to see where this healing journey leads both of them, let's keep going together. In mid-November, Asheville High School invited me to speak at their assembly. The principal, a woman named Dr. Patricia Morrison, whom I'd never met, called me one afternoon in late October. "Mr. Pierce," she said, "we've been following your story in the news. Your work with the Elder Protection Fund has inspired many of our students and their families. Would you be willing to speak to our students?" I hesitated. I'd given talks at senior centers and community groups, but speaking to 400 high school students felt different, bigger, more exposed. "What would you want me to talk about?" I asked. "Your career, your experience. Whatever you think they need to hear," she said. "You taught for 35 years, Mr. Pierce. These kids need to hear from someone who's lived through challenges and come out the other side." So I said yes. The assembly was scheduled for November 15th, a Friday morning. I spent the week before preparing notes, then throwing them away and starting over. I'd taught history for 3.5 decades. I knew how to command a classroom. But standing before hundreds of teenagers to talk about my own life felt vastly different from teaching about the Civil War or the Industrial Revolution. The night before, Blair called. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified," I admitted. "You're going to be great," she said. "And Dad, I'll be there, in the audience." "You don't have to drive all the way from Atlanta. I want to," she said firmly. "I want to hear this." On Friday morning, I arrived at Asheville High School at 8:30. The auditorium was a modern space with excellent acoustics and comfortable seating. Dr. Morrison met me at the door and walked me backstage. "We have about 400 students in the auditorium," she said. "Juniors and seniors. They're excited to hear from you." Through the curtain, I could hear the low murmur of teenage voices, the shuffle of feet, the occasional laugh. My hands were shaking. I felt exactly the way I'd felt on my first day of teaching in 1987, hopeful and terrified in equal measure. Dr. Morrison stepped onto the stage and introduced me. The auditorium quieted. "Please welcome Mr. Randall Pierce, a retired history teacher who taught in our community for 35 years and who has an important story to share with you today." I walked onto the stage. 400 faces looked up at me. And there in the 5th row on the left side was Blair. She smiled and gave me a small wave. I felt my nervousness begin to ease. "Good morning," I said. "Thank you for having me here." I told them about my career, about walking into my first classroom at age 32 and feeling completely unprepared, about the students who'd challenged me and the ones who'd taught me more than I'd taught them, about why I'd become a teacher in the first place, because I believed that understanding the past could help us build a better future. Then I told them about the past 2 years. Not all of it. Teenagers didn't need to hear every detail of my family's dysfunction, but enough. I told them about loss, about betrayal, about how the people closest to you can sometimes hurt you the most, and how systems meant to protect the vulnerable can be twisted by those with bad intentions. But I also learned something else, I said. I learned about the power of truth. I paused and looked at Blair. She was watching me with tears in her eyes. My wife Lorraine used to say something to me. She'd say, "The truth will always protect the people you love." And she was right. When everything else fell apart, when I was confused and hurt and didn't know who to trust, the truth was what saved me. The truth about who I was. The truth about my relationships. The truth about the people trying to take advantage of me. I told them about the irrevocable trust, about Stuart's help, about the community members who'd testified on my behalf, about Lawrence's investigation. "None of us can get through life alone," I said. "We need people we can trust. We need communities that support us. And most importantly, we need to live in truth, even when that truth is painful, even when it reveals things we'd rather not see." I talked for 20 minutes. When I finished, the auditorium was silent for a moment. Then one student stood, then another. Then the entire auditorium rose to their feet, applauding. I looked at Blair. She was standing too, clapping, tears streaming down her face. After the assembly, I stood in the lobby as students filed past. Several stopped to shake my hand or thank me. One girl, maybe 16, approached shyly. My grandmother almost lost her house to a scam last year," she said. "Your talk reminded me to check on her more often. Thank you." "You're welcome," I said, my throat tight. Then I saw them, Barbara, Kenneth, Russell, and Lawrence, all standing near the door. They'd come without telling me, wanting to surprise me. Barbara hugged me first. "That was beautiful, Randall." "Lorraine would be so proud," Kenneth added. Lawrence clapped me on the shoulder. "You did good, my friend." And then Blair was there, stepping into the circle of my friends. She fit seamlessly, as though she'd always belonged there. Barbara pulled her into a hug. Kenneth shook her hand warmly. Russell told her she looked just like her mother. We stood together in that lobby, my oldest friends, my daughter and me, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt whole. As we left the auditorium together, walking into the bright November sunshine, I looked around at my community, my friends and Blair, standing with them. Nearly 2 years after that fateful New Year's Eve, this is where we are. Marcus Dunn, the man who called himself Pierce Donovan, is serving a 12-year sentence in federal prison. He was convicted on 6 counts of wire fraud, 4 counts of elder financial abuse, and 3 counts of identity theft. With good behavior, he might be released in 2033. He'll be 57 years old. The 6 families he victimized are slowly recovering their losses through court-ordered restitution, though money can never fully repair the damage he caused. Marshall Crane was disbarred by the North Carolina State Bar in April of 2025. The disciplinary board found that he had knowingly filed false statements in the conservatorship petition and had failed to conduct even basic due diligence on his client's claims. His law license was revoked permanently. Last I heard, he was working as a paralegal in a small firm in Charlotte. His legal career permanently destroyed by his willingness to participate in fraud for a fee. Blair paid off her $110,000 debt in 18 months. She worked 2 jobs, her position at the domestic violence nonprofit and weekend shifts at a bookstore, and followed her financial counselor's strict payment plan. She filed for bankruptcy dismissal in September of this year, and her credit is slowly rebuilding. She still lives in Atlanta, still sees her therapist twice a week, and still calls me every Sunday evening without fail. The conversation has gotten easier each time. Stuart Finch remains my attorney and my friend. He sits on the board of directors for the Elder Protection Fund, the nonprofit we established in March of 2025. The fund provides free legal consultations to seniors facing financial exploitation, and it's helped more than 60 families in the past 8 months. Stuart donates his time and expertise, and together we've built something Lorraine would have been proud of. Lawrence Miles is still my closest friend. He retired from private investigation work in June, but continues to consult on elder abuse cases pro bono. He's the one who taught me how to spot the warning signs of financial exploitation, and he's helped train dozens of volunteers for our speaking program. We have coffee every Tuesday morning at the same cafe where Blair and I had our first reconciliation meeting. The routine grounds us both. As for me, I'm still speaking. I've given 42 talks in the past 10 months at senior centers, community colleges, church groups, and civic organizations. I tell my story, I warn people about the tactics predators use, and I teach them how to protect themselves and their loved ones. After every talk, someone approaches me with their own story of exploitation or near miss. I listen. I offer resources. I remind them they're not alone. The garden is thriving. The roses bloomed beautifully. This past summer, the lavender Blair and I planted has taken root, and the beds are mulched and ready for winter. Barbara still helps once a week, and Blair visits every other weekend to work alongside me. The garden has become what it always was, a place of growth and healing and memory. Blair and I are still healing. We don't pretend the past didn't happen. We don't sweep the betrayal under the rug, but we're learning to live with it, to grow around it, the way a tree grows around a scar. She's my daughter. I'm her father. We're finding our way back to each other, one Sunday phone call and one garden visit at a time. The house is still mine. The trust Lorraine created still protects it. And every morning I walk past the framed photo Blair gave me, the three of us in the garden, smiling whole, and I remember what we had and what we're slowly rebuilding. And there's one more thing I want to tell you. It is late January 2026. I'm sitting in Lorraine's garden. The morning air is crisp and cold, but the sun is bright. Around me, the garden rests in winter dormancy. The rose canes stand bare and brown, pruned back and waiting for spring. The lavender plants are gray-green mounds, but even in winter the garden is beautiful. Small signs of life are emerging. Crocuses push through the mulch in brave clusters of purple and white. Snowdrops nod near the fence. A patch of hellebores blooms defiantly in the shade, their white flowers tinged with pink. Lorraine always said winter was her favorite time in the garden. You can see the bones of it, she'd tell me. The structure, the promise of what's coming. I hear a car in the driveway. Blair. She walks around the side of the house carrying her gardening tools, a new set she bought last month, not borrowed, not her mother's. She's wearing jeans and an old sweatshirt, her face bright with cold and purpose. "Morning, Dad," she calls. "Morning, sweetheart." She surveys the garden with the practiced eye she learned from Lorraine. "The roses look good. You did a nice job with the winter pruning." Barbara helped, I admit. I'm still learning. "We all are," Blair says softly. We work together in comfortable silence. Blair deadheads the hellebores while I rake leaves from the flower beds. The physical labor feels good grounding. This garden has been my anchor through everything: Lorraine's death, Blair's betrayal, the trial, the slow process of healing. After an hour, I call Blair over to the David Austin rose that was Lorraine's pride and joy. "Let me show you something," I say. I demonstrate late winter pruning, removing damaged canes, shaping the plant for spring growth, making clean cuts. Blair watches, then tries it herself. Her cuts are confident and precise. "Perfect," I say. "Your mother would be proud of you." Blair's eyes fill with tears, but she's smiling. I hope so. We work until noon, then sit together on the bench with sandwiches Blair brought. The winter sun is warm on our faces despite the cold air. "I've been thinking about everything that happened," Blair says quietly. "About how close we came to losing each other completely." "I think about it too," I say. "The garden taught me something," I say after a moment. "Lorraine tried to tell me for years, but I didn't really understand until now." "What's that?" "That pruning isn't destruction. It's necessary for growth. You have to cut away the dead wood, the diseased parts, the branches growing in the wrong direction." It looks brutal when you're doing it. The plant looks bare and wounded, but come spring it grows back stronger. Blair looks at me. We're the garden. We're the garden. I agree. We had to cut away the parts that were hurting us. The lies, the manipulation, the broken trust. It was painful. We both bear the scars, but we're growing back. Different than before, Blair asks. Different than before, I say. Not the same family we were, but maybe we needed to become something new. Blair takes my hand. I'm glad you didn't give up on me. I'm glad you came back, I say. We return to work. Blair asks about the Elder Protection Fund, and I tell her about the latest family we've helped. She tells me about a woman at her nonprofit who just escaped an abusive marriage. We are both doing work that matters. We are both helping others survive what we survived. As the sun begins to set, Blair packs up her tools. Same time next week, she asks. I'd like that, I say. She hugs me easily now, naturally, the way a daughter hugs her father. I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. I watch her drive away, then turn back to look at the garden. The bare rose canes reach toward the sky. The crocuses dot the mulch with color. The hellebores bloom patiently in the shade. I lost my wife. I nearly lost my daughter. I nearly lost my home. But I found my community again. I found justice. I found a second chance. And beneath the frozen ground, thousands of roots and bulbs and seeds are waiting for spring, waiting to grow, waiting to bloom. The garden is blooming. Not today. Not yet. But soon. And so are we. Looking back on my story, I see now what I couldn't see then. Family betrayal cuts deepest, because it comes from those we trust most. But I also learned that betrayal doesn't have to be the end of the story. If you're facing family betrayal like I did, here's my advice. Don't ignore the warning signs. Lorraine saw Pierce for what he was immediately, but I dismissed her concerns because I wanted Blair to be happy. That choice nearly cost me everything. Trust your instincts. Protect yourself legally. Lorraine's irrevocable trust saved me. And remember, setting boundaries isn't cruelty. It's self-preservation. Grandpa stories like mine aren't uncommon. I've heard dozens of similar tales through the Elder Protection Fund. Grandpa stories of manipulation, isolation, and financial exploitation. These grandpa stories remind us that predators target the vulnerable and grief makes us all vulnerable. The hardest lesson, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Blair and I are rebuilding, but the scars remain. I'm learning that healing isn't linear. It's messy, painful, and slow, like pruning roses in winter. But with patience and faith, growth is possible. I believe God allowed this trial to teach me something crucial, that love requires both trust and wisdom. Blind trust enables abusers. But wisdom without compassion leaves us isolated and bitter. I'm still learning to balance both. Thank you for walking this journey with me to the end. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you do if you found yourself in Randall's situation, facing family betrayal from someone you loved? Drop a comment below. Your perspective matters. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing so you won't miss future videos. A gentle reminder, while inspired by real-life elder abuse patterns and legal protections, certain elements have been dramatized for storytelling purposes. If this content doesn't align with your preferences, feel free to explore other videos that might suit you better. The garden taught me this even after the harshest winter spring always comes.